Life Audio.
He's always there, and there's always a possibility that after you cross this next bridge, that there is so much more waiting for you on the other side.
Looking to grow your faith but short on time? The Holy Reads app is your answer. With over 1,000 book summaries, daily devotionals, and more, you can find inspiration anytime, anywhere. From parenting tips to theological insights, Holy Reads has something for everyone. Want to deepen your connection with God? Holy Reads offers a wealth of resources to help you grow spiritually. From scripture-based content to soothing meditations, you can find peace and purpose in your daily life. Holy Reads is more than just an app. It's a community of faith. With 23 categories, you can find resources that speak to your heart. Join 350,000 Christians who use Holy Reads daily. Download Holy Reads today and start your spiritual journey. That's HOLYREADS. Download the app today. Hello and welcome to the Encourager Podcast, where we have encouraging conversations to help you joyfully harmonize your home and work life. I'm your host, Rebecca Scott. I'm a wife, mother, designer, coach, and author. I'm here to help encourage and empower you to confidently make decisions that work for you and your stage of life, whatever that might be. Hello, Encouragers. Today's podcast is brought to you by Just Thrive Probiotics, my go-to supplement to feel more energized and lighter. I also love the Just Thrive Calm supplement to keep my thoughts from spinning and keep them more focused and in the moment. Use code ENCOURAGER to get 15% off by going to justthrive.com. On today's episode, we're talking with Latasha Kennedy, a wife, mother, entrepreneur, and a filmmaker. And we're going to go into a little bit of details of the recent film that she did, and then also a really big life circumstance that happened in 2020. Amidst all of us experiencing different things in 2020, Latasha's journey was a little bit different and a lot more involved, if you will. So welcome to the podcast, Latasha. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Okay. So tell me, how does the film journey come about in your story? Because as I was reading your biography, you have 22 global awards.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? So
Yes.
What happened was, I've been doing the arts since I was a kid, and I started performing professionally as a teen. And I went to college. I did the whole thing, intern, all the things. But what was really important to me, even as a young person, was to be able to tell my own stories. And so even though I navigated to commercial work and acting work behind the camera, eventually I just could not hold back anymore, and I had to tell my own stories. And so I started with just telling, sweet, special stories that were close to me. I had had a baby, and I wanted to have a conversation about how hard it is postpartum to sort of find your way back to
Yes.
yourself, so to speak, after you have that beautiful bundle of joy. And so I created something that was specific to that. And that was just a way for me to get behind the camera and just practice and sort of stretch myself as an artist. But after I did that, I then wanted to go back to commercial work. And I had a mentor who I had worked with for several years, on and off. And she herself was a very successful model. And so I went to her and I was like, I really want to go back to commercial work, but I could just use some guidance because I've been out of that space for a while. And so she was so helpful. She told me my look was a little too edgy, dye the blonde hair, go back to brown, keep the pixie haircut that I had at the time. But she positioned me with the right photographer. She designed my comp card. She told me where to go for my agent. And all of that happened. And before I could tell her thank you, she died by suicide in Mexico at a modeling job. And so, she died in Mexico. Well, at work. And so it was devastating. It was really devastating to lose her, but then to also lose her in that way. And she was so special to the artist community. And so obviously that was really hurtful. But what was even more hurtful to me were the conversations that were around her husband and the fact that he had to get the her body back from Mexico to New York, and the conversations around his finances and was he going to be able to keep his home, and and then just sort of like the grief of this life that they had together that is no longer a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I just really had so much compassion for him, because I just felt like, wow, it's so easy to offer your condolences when something first happens, but eventually the phone calls dry up.
Yep.
And that person is just left with the aftermath of what has happened. And it doesn't necessarily heal all wounds or all issues within that period of time that you're trying to bury them, and say final goodbyes. So I actually put all of that processing and questions and, compassion into a story called One Last Goodbye. And the purpose of that story was to explore what happens to loss survivors when they lose someone who dies by suicide. And so I also wanted to take that story and put it in the Black family, because I felt like in my culture, we were not having those type of conversations on that very deep, granular level. I didn't feel like we often got to see Black men deal with that type of pain with integrity and be able to explore their vulnerability in that way. And so when I was able to do that film and we had those conversations, I was moved by just the ways in which men would express themselves and express how the film impacted them. And within that first year, we won 22 global awards.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's something I'm always careful to say this because grief is grief. I mean, it stinks, but there's something, I don't know if I would say bizarre or different or what the adjective would be about death by suicide, because it is so alarming. I mean, it's like a car accident. It's just like, what happened? But even in a car accident, there's not the mental part of it. So when there's a suicide death, instead of like moving to like, most people do, I'm so sorry for your loss, but they are, their next questions are like, what do you think happened? And you don't have the answers, but it's our natural human instinct to want to say, well, this was going on and this was going on. You feel like you have to tell all the bad things about probably why it happened and explain it to people. And that is exhausting when you are going through grief. And so I appreciate also that you're calling it a story. It is a film that we can watch. And because it does need to be told, the vulnerability after a death like that is just raw. And when you can't answer their questions and there is this like, well, why do you think it happened? Then depending on how bad they wanted the answer, those things trickle. It's like, well, they didn't have the answer, so I'm going to find it somewhere else. So then you feel like there's a lot of conversation going on behind your family's back. So there's that going on.
Yes,
It's just
the shame
it's
of it
so
all.
layered. Yes, it is so layered. So it's
Yeah.
interesting too that you took your own take and put it into the Black community, thinking, what about our Black men and telling their story of vulnerability? So I appreciate too that you were going to be like, okay, well, what kind of story do I want to tell?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting in this story, the exploration is between brother and sister. And so what makes it interesting is this, the conflicts that they have, even though they love each other and they both loved her. But because he's actually facing eviction, right? Because everything is falling apart for him, right? Also to sort of pull from the real story, which is, will he be able to keep his home, this space that he had with her? And so when we first meet him, he hasn't touched anything, since her passing. And it's just all these different nuances that, that we really have to explore with people in the human heart, because it's so fragile. And I don't think that men get the room to be vulnerable and to tell stories like this in a way that's really true to them, that still leaves them with the room to still be a man and have their dignity. And so I just felt like that was just so important. And I really appreciated, so many men sharing their story with me, whether it was that they also lost a loved one in that way, or whether they themselves have been struggling. It was a really warm, nurturing time as a filmmaker. because it was still a lot of give that I felt I needed to offer as a storyteller beyond the screen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because after a death, no matter what the death is, there is still just a ton of digging out. It's not
Yeah.
just like put them in the ground and then you go back to work on Monday. I mean, like you said, there could be facing eviction, they're facing family dynamics. It's so thick and layered. And I can't help but think too, I was reading just this morning, the devotional with the Bible verses around Job. And he's going through mass suffering, and these three friends come and they sit with him in silence for 7 days. And I had this moment where I was like, that is what we should be practicing now, because it doesn't matter if they're not trying to be mean-spirited or not. We say the dumbest thing as humans.
Yeah.
We're just grasping for answers, especially women,
Yeah.
like we're just grasping to fix it. And then, like you said, men have a whole new layer of trying to sort through it. And so I thought, man, the power in silence is just being there. And then when it goes bad is when the three friends start giving him bad counsel. After the 7 days, they're like, hey, well, maybe there's this. And you're like, okay, note,
Maybe
everyone.
just curse God.
Yes, yes. They were like, that is not what I can do here. And so I think the storytelling that you did is very good for us to remember, that just being a consistent listener and a consistent companion during it will not solve, because that's not the right answer, because there is no solving it, but it does stand as companionship during grief.
Yeah, and people just need you to be there. I mean, how often I can't tell you how many times I have to say, I'm so sorry, you have my deepest condolences, and depending on our level of friendship or relationship may depend on how close or, far away I am from that actual family during that difficult season. But I just think that it is one of the hardest things to navigate, because what do you say? Because I certainly don't want to, at a time when someone is so heavy, say, well, God is still in control, or, and it's like, we know that. We know that.
Right. Yes.
We know that. But the heart wants what the heart wants. And in this moment, this person wants their loved one. And so navigating that with the amount of sensitivity and still offering the love of Christ in a way where it can truly be, where it's palpable for them to be able to digest in that season, I think this was really important.
Looking to grow your faith but short on time? The Holy Reads app is your answer. With over 1,000 book summaries, daily devotionals, and more, you can find inspiration anytime, anywhere. From parenting tips to theological insights, Holy Reads has something for everyone. Want to deepen your connection with God? Holy Reads offers a wealth of resources to help you grow spiritually. From scripture-based content to soothing meditations, you can find peace and purpose in your daily life. Holy Reads is more than just an app. It's a community of faith. With 23 categories, you can find resources that speak to your heart. Join 350,000 Christians who use Holy Reads daily. Download Holy Reads today and start your spiritual journey. That's HOLYREADS. Download the app today. Yes, it's so important. So thank you so much for creating the film so that it just gives context to maybe what families and friends and brothers and fathers, everyone that is going through the layeredness of death by suicide. Thank you so much for doing that. So I want to go a little bit further into your journey too, because you're this award-winning, and we also mentioned like you're running multiple roles. You're a wife and you're a mother. 2020 hits, and what happens in your life?
2020 was maddening, right? Yes. I really thought the hardest part was trying to teach my first grader math.
Right.
I don't understand modern math. So I was trying my best to do that and, do all the things in the kitchen. We had all the experiments. And I was like, whoa, like COVID is really interesting right now in the sense that both kids are home and we're just trying to navigate this. And then my husband's also a physician. So the idea that he was in the hospital during that time and we had no idea what was going on, it was just a very scary time. And so we were just so happy to make it to our anniversary. It was the night before our anniversary. And we were just chatting and enjoying each other. And then I had an episode where I started slurring my words. My left hand closed. I grabbed my head because it started hurting. And that lasted for about, I don't know, it seemed like forever, but maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. And and it presented like a stroke. And so my husband was very concerned because I didn't have any factors or any health issues that suggested that I would have a stroke. And so when he was asking me questions, one of them was, go ahead and smile. And I was like, I cannot smile. And he was like, okay. So he was going to have to go to work the next day, and I was going to be home with the children. And I just did not want to be home with the kids and not know what was going on with me. So I got in the car, I drove myself to the hospital, because at that time, no one could go with you to the hospital. So I went by myself. I told them all the things my husband said to say, which was I just had an episode that presented like a stroke. And so they took me immediately, and CAT scans showed that I had a large brain tumor. And then an MRI showed that it was a meningioma and that it would need to be removed almost immediately. So that day, they released me to go home. I had a conversation with my neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins. And she basically told, my husband and I that, yes, it absolutely had to be removed. It was about 6 centimeters. It had engaged with my bone, my skull. And so that's why I had the episode that I had, because it was running out of room. It was starting to press on my skull. And so, they said that resection or the surgery was imminent. And so that surgery was going to take place 3 weeks after this date that we're speaking. And they also said that they had to share this with me, that the possibility that, I could bleed out on the table, that I could have a stroke after the surgery, or that I just would not leave the hospital as myself were all possible. And so we're just sort of grappling now with my mortality and the fact that, we don't know what's going to happen. And yet still having to hold on so tightly to Christ and really believe that, our story was in his hands. And so that's exactly what those 3 weeks leading up to that was like. And so I had to have this really annoying. I called it annoying because by the time it was the day before my surgery, I had become angry almost that I had to go through this. And so they had to create like a map on my head with these stickers so they would know where to go and during the surgery. And so I reported to the surgery that morning, and they began at around like 9 or 10. And according to my husband, they called him and said, we don't see her coming out of this without major defects, whether they be cognitive or physical. And so I woke up 12 hours later because the surgery ended up being 12 hours. And I remember asking the nurse, what time is it? And she said, it's about 10:15. And I was like, wow, that is such a long day for my family. Because I was thinking about my boys and my husband and my mom, and the people who we had shared this with who were praying for me that day. And I asked for my phone. And when I woke up, Rebecca, I had a paw. My left hand was like a little paw. It was closed completely. I couldn't use it. And I could barely see. But I could open the phone and use one eye to put in my code and just text my husband, hi. And so he says he got that text after putting the kids to bed and having this day with them where they prayed together and they jogged in the park and, just to sort of like
distraction,
keep their mind distracted. Exactly. And then at midnight, the house is quiet, it's dark, and he gets a text. And he thinks maybe it's his mom or his sister checking in, and it's me saying hi. And he's like, oh my gosh, like the amount of like cognitive skill it takes to ask for the phone, open the phone,
And the empathetic act that when you woke up, you were like, wow, that was a really long day for my family. Like, pretty sure your womanhood was in check. Like, yep, I'm still checking in on everybody.
I never thought about it that way.
That's profound.
Yes. Very true. Very true. Very true.
And so, like, not to fast forward or anything, but all of the effects that they had warned you about, none of that occurred?
No. So I had I spoke of the little paw that I had.
Yes, yes, okay.
And so they brought in occupational therapy right away to sort of help me regain control over my hand. But my hand works just fine. There is some numbness but I'll take that,
Yeah, right.
No, that was the primary concern. I had to, regain some balance and learn how to walk. The hardest part was really just it being painful, and I would sleep for weeks, like for 19 hours at a time. So thankfully, my in-laws took our kids for a couple weeks just so that I could just heal and not have to be mom, because my kids would come in and, you see your kids, we all have crossed over. We're on the other side now, but mommy still has another bridge to cross, and I just needed space to not have to be strong and not have to like wear a smile when I really wanted to like break down in tears, but although I couldn't really cry too much because my head was like so tight, but,
Oh,
but never,
interesting.
yeah, because of the sutras, there would be times I would read scripture that would just remind me of how good God was, the promise that he kept, by bringing me through this surgery. And I would feel like I wanted to weep, but I could not because it was just so much happening up here that my husband was like, bring it down. Deep breaths, and
Wow.
like really try to like find another place or
To
another
process
way
it.
to
Yes.
process that. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that is really interesting that physically the weeping could not occur at the level you wanted it to, so you had to take it to a different place.
Yeah, yeah. And even still, I mean, that experience for us was sort of a catalyst to us creating a whole different chapter in our life as a family. And that's actually how we did end up in South Florida. Just sort of as a family, just experiencing a shift and wanting something different. And it didn't all happen at once, but we certainly leaned in as God sort of, had different things happen in our lives at different times after the surgery.
So tell us about that. When you moved to Florida, you made this shift. What was the shift? What did you decide what was important?
When you are watching a movie and the hero is just having the time of his life, right? He is living his dream, and then he gets in the car, he's super excited, and he hits a tree, right? And
Yes,
then,
yes.
and then he wakes up at some old lady's home who found him on the side of the road, and she and her husband are nursing him back to health in some remote location, right? And he has to find his way back. That's how I felt when I was recovering from my surgery, because I couldn't drive. Everyone had to come, pick me up or take me here and there. And I was a girl who was on the go. I was creating projects. I had a whole team. I was doing my thing. So the idea of now having to wait and sit and not be able to do as much, it was very hard to live like that. And so my husband noticed that. And my kids were still hybrid. Actually, my kids were still at home learning from school. They hadn't gone back into the building yet because we had the option to keep them home. So because I was still recovering, we took that option.
Yeah, had to.
Yeah. And so, but my husband was like, I think we should consider getting closer to the school because we were commuting. And that way the kids can have more to do and you can have more to do, right? Because we were living in the suburbs. It was cute, but I felt very isolated and it was starting to really wear on me emotionally. I noticed it, but my husband was the one who really was like, let's do something different. My oldest son, Elijah, he sort of started navigating his journey differently and finding some new goals. My baby boy was interested in having new friends. My husband was interested in exploring his job and in his career in a different way. And we all loved Florida, right? And so when my son decided that he wanted to really lean in, he had missed a ton of deadlines in DC. to be able to explore new schools. And so there was this school that I learned about in South Florida. And so we decided to just risk it all, just come down, visit the school. And when we did, all four of us thought like, we belong here. This is our school. And so the children were very excited about attending, but it was May, Rebecca. It was at the end of the school year. They hadn't yet finished in Maryland. And this new school year was going to start in August. And so he was like, well, Daddy's got to get a job. Daddy's got to get a new license. Like, you guys got to get into school. Like there's this whole process to do in 90 days. If we can do it, it would be a miracle, is what my husband said. And then in 90 days, we moved. We did it. And our children started in the new school. And it's just been it's been such an exciting experience. And we've learned so much about ourselves and each other in the journey.
I would take that from you too, is like, even your son was empathetic, but she's clearly learning from his mother. It's like, wait, but if I choose this, and that means Daddy has to get licensed here, and this is what it means for my family members. So what a beautiful note to like being in community with your family, is like thinking about, well, what does this mean for my sibling, and what does this mean for my parents? I think that's super important for them to zoom out and look outside of just themselves.
Yeah. And I think that really the idea in our family of being a team, and it not just being about daddy or mommy or the oldest son, the golden child or the baby, but it's really about us as a family and the legacy and the story that we're trying to tell together. And so there's this idea of, we lean in to whoever needs the most attention at that time. And then we also share the spotlight. So that I really lean into that, especially with my youngest, who can't even take the trash out without being dressed to the nines, right?
Okay.
And so when we're trying to get somewhere for his brother, he's trying to make sure he's dressed appropriately for the moment. And I'm like, that's great, but it's not your moment. And you are going to make us late because you can't find your special socks, So I need you to put on the best socks you can find and come along, and it's just the idea of understanding that, this moment, every moment isn't about you.
Right. Yes.
That's okay. And that when it is time to show up for someone else, that you show up, you be present 100% for that person, because you fully expect that from your brother and from your family. So it's this exchange. Even now, I told you my oldest is home. He's sick and he wasn't feeling well last night. But his primary chore at home is our dishes, right? So he does the dishes every night. But he was ill. And so the youngest was just chilling. And I was like, listen, you're going to take over tonight, And he was like, what happened? And I was like, your brother is sick, your brother's sick. He's resting. So we're going to let him rest and we're going to help him. The job still has to get done. And so he came over, we laughed and played and splashed water on each other, to make it something enjoyable. But the lesson is that we cover each other. I don't need to pull my brother out who's feverish to do the dishes when I'm fully capable of contributing, my time for that as well. So it just really helps our family flow. Yeah.
I think it's okay to say the phrase, it's not about you. And you can still say in a loving but affirmative way, is like, I understand that this is frustrating, whatever the minor thing is, or meaning it's not as major as the other sibling that's going through something, but I have to politely remind them, this moment, this day, this time right now actually isn't about you. So you have got to zoom out and look at what's around you. We can still talk about that later, but in this moment, for right now, this is not about you. And if you're going into this situation thinking it's about you, it will be a fail all the way around.
Yeah.
So
and
go ahead.
Yeah. I just think that these are the life lessons, that are so important for our kids to learn, and to not walk around feeling entitled to anything.
Right. I mean, think of the word selfie. It's kind of gross, right?
Yeah.
So they're constantly learning about what self, but not necessarily in a great way. And so we have to keep reminding about them the word other. Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Latasha, for sharing, especially just the journey of the film, which I think will be super impactful. We will put that in the show notes, you guys, and then also make sure you're on our email list. We will be putting it in our email for you as well. And then I'm super glad you did make it through the brain surgery and that you're still continuing to be an amazing example for women and for families out there. How do we find out more about you and the programs that you have set up for women, Latasha?
Absolutely. So you can find me at girlfriendsthriving.com. You can also reach out to me and talk to me directly right on Instagram at Latasha Kennedy or at Girlfriends Thriving. And I'm happy to talk to you about any of our programs and how we can help you.
I love it. Well, thank you for making the difficult choices that you did make and just providing a framework of you can make big choices and thrive on the other side of it. How can you encourage our encouragers?
The best way I can encourage the encouragers is to always think about possibilities and to always consider that if you have the vision, if you can see it, then that means that it is absolutely possible. And whatever steps are necessary to take, we take those steps, whether they be big steps or small ones. You just consistently take one step forward. And I can't stress enough how important prayer is to any vision and how powerful the God is in terms of empowering you to be able to see that vision through. And no matter how dark the season, He's always there. And there's always a possibility that after you cross this next bridge, that there is so much more waiting for you on the other side.
Yeah. Whether you're crawling or running, the vision, you can make forward motion, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, Latasha. Until next time, encouragers, we got this because He's got us. Thanks so much for tuning in. If the Encourager podcast has helped or encouraged you in any way, please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review. And then help us spread the message of encouragement and hope by sharing the podcast with others. Ready to bring more organization and joy into your life? The Encourager Academy helps you harmonize your home and work life through our online course and coaching programs. Our 5-system approach, me, food, family, work, and home, tackles your biggest obstacles, offering lifetime access to video lessons and guided worksheets. Learn at your own pace with practical tools and strategies. Enroll now at encourageracademy.com and use code WeGotThis for $50 off. Are you ready to finally create systems that help you thrive in both home and work life? Join my 10-week coaching cohort designed for busy women like you. Together, we'll create customized, foolproof systems for managing your home, business, and personal life with joy and purpose. With live coaching, practical tools, and a supportive community, you'll leave feeling organized, confident, and in control. Don't wait. Spots are limited to 10 women. Visit encouragerpodcast.com to apply.
The Historical Jesus Podcast is the sweeping saga of the life and times of Galilean Jesus of Nazareth, as well as the faith, religion, and church founded to honor and disseminate his acts and teachings. Join me, Mark Vinette, on this fascinating journey through time, exploring the many great works of Christian theology, literature, architecture, music, and art inspired by the words and deeds of Jesus Christ.